Someone near the front of the room looked at Bruce Lee and said he could sit in the back. It wasn't loud. It wasn't rude. It was just said. Bruce Lee nodded. He didn't smile. He didn't frown. He didn't ask a question. He simply turned and started walking. The room was already settling into place. Chairs were lined up in loose rows, not perfectly straight. Some people had chosen to sit on the mats instead, stretching their legs out in front of them or leaning back on their hands. There were small sounds everywhere. A bag zipper closed. A bottle rolled and bumped into a chair leg. Someone whispered to a friend about where to leave their shoes. A phone buzzed and was quickly turned face down. It felt like a normal room. The kind of room people sit in every day. Not quiet, not loud, just in between. Bruce Lee walked through the narrow space between the chairs. The aisle was tight. People moved without being asked. Someone pulled their feet back so he could pass. Someone lifted a jacket off the floor. A man leaned to the side so their shoulders wouldn't touch. Bruce Lee didn't change his speed. He didn't hurry. He didn't slow down. Each step was the same as the last. Some people barely noticed him. They kept looking forward. They kept talking in low voices. They kept adjusting their seats. Others looked up for a moment. One person leaned back in their chair to watch him go by. A woman in the middle row followed him with her eyes, then slowly turned back to face the front again. No one said his name. No one pointed. He reached the back wall. It was plain, just a light-colored surface with a folded mat resting against it. He chose a spot near the edge of the mat. Not the center, not a place that stood out. He sat down. He bent his knees and placed his feet flat on the floor. His hands rested loosely on his thighs. His shoulders stayed relaxed. He didn't lean forward. He didn't lean back. He just stayed there. Nothing about the way he sat asked anyone to look at him. At the front of the room, the person who was meant to speak cleared their throat. It was a small sound, but it felt loud in the quiet that had just settled. A few late people slipped through the door and looked around for empty chairs. One of them walked carefully so their shoes wouldn't make noise. Another held a jacket in their arms instead of putting it down, not sure where to sit yet. Someone in the first row crossed their legs. Someone else uncapped a pen and then capped it again. The low talk in the room faded away. The room felt like it was waiting. For a moment, everything stayed the same. No one moved. No one spoke. No one stood up. People faced the front. Their eyes were on the empty space where the talk was supposed to begin. Then, in the third row, a man turned his head. Not all the way, just enough to look behind him. His eyes went to the back of the room. He stayed like that for a second longer than normal. Then he turned back to the front. A few breaths passed. The man shifted in his seat. He turned again. This time, he didn't turn back right away. A woman 2 seats over noticed. She saw the way he was looking and followed his line of sight. She leaned a little to the side so she could see past the people in front of her. She looked toward the back. She didn't say anything. She just stayed there, looking. Someone in the back row adjusted their stance. They stood up slowly, holding the back of a chair for balance. They whispered, "Sorry," as they stepped around a bag on the floor. A chair made a soft scraping sound as it moved a few inches. Bruce Lee stayed where he was. He didn't look up. He didn't look around. His hands stayed resting on his legs. His back stayed straight but relaxed. The person at the front opened their mouth like they were about to speak. Then they paused. They glanced toward the middle of the room. Then, without meaning to, their eyes went to the back. They looked down at their notes. They looked back up again. The room felt different now. Not loud, not tense, just slightly changed. People shifted in their seats. Someone leaned forward with their elbows on their knees. Someone else sat back and folded their arms. A quiet feeling moved through the room, like something was about to happen, but no one knew what it was. And in the back, Bruce Lee stayed still. 2 people near the back of the room shifted where they were standing. They didn't move at the same time. One stepped first. The other waited, then followed. They didn't walk straight toward Bruce Lee. They moved to the side, like they didn't want to get in anyone's way. One of them placed a hand on the back of a chair to steady themselves, then leaned forward just a little. It looked like they were trying to hear something that hadn't been said yet. Someone behind them cleared their throat softly. A woman near the wall picked up her bag and held it against her leg instead of putting it back down. She stayed standing, even though there was an empty chair right next to her. At the front of the room, the person who was supposed to begin looked up again. They glanced across the rows of chairs. They saw the small spaces where people had shifted. They noticed a few empty seats that hadn't been empty before. They hesitated. They looked down at their notes. They turned one page, even though it didn't seem like they needed to. The rhythm of the room changed. In the middle row, a man stood up slowly. He didn't say anything. He didn't explain. He just pushed his chair back a little and stepped into the open space between the rows. A moment later, a woman beside him stood too. She picked up her jacket, folded it over her arm, and took 2 small steps toward the back. No one told them to move. No one asked them why. A few people looked at each other. One person raised their eyebrows, like they were about to ask a question, then didn't. The front rows began to thin, not all at once. One person at a time. A chair scraped softly as someone pulled it back. A bag was lifted from the floor. A jacket was slipped over an arm. Each small sound felt louder than it should have. The space around Bruce Lee grew wider for a moment. Then it filled again. Someone stepped closer, stopping a few feet away. Another person stood just behind them. A third moved to the side, trying to see without blocking anyone else. Someone whispered, "I think he's back there." The words were quiet, but they carried. A person in the front row turned their head. Then another. A man near the aisle stood up and took a slow look toward the back of the room. He paused, then walked a few steps in that direction. Bruce Lee didn't move. He didn't stand. He didn't change the way he was sitting. His hands stayed resting on his legs. His shoulders stayed loose. His eyes stayed calm. People kept moving around him. Some stood with their arms crossed. Some put their hands in their pockets. One person knelt down so they could see better past the people in front of them. The front of the room felt farther away now. A chair near the front tipped slightly when someone brushed past it. It stayed like that, leaning forward, untouched. No one went back to fix it. The room didn't feel rushed. It didn't feel planned. It felt like something that was happening on its own. And in the middle of it, Bruce Lee stayed still, like he had nowhere else to be. The space around Bruce Lee began to change shape. It wasn't sudden. It wasn't clear at first. People didn't rush toward him. They drifted. One person took a small step forward, then stopped. Another moved to the side so they wouldn't block anyone else. Someone behind them leaned left, then right, trying to find a clear view. A loose shape formed. Not a circle yet. Just a group of people standing close enough to feel like they were part of the same moment. Some crossed their arms, like they were settling in. Some rested their hands on their hips. One person knelt down slowly, careful not to bump into the shoes beside them. A woman near the edge of the group tucked a strand of hair behind her ear and leaned forward, just a little. Someone in the back whispered a name, then stopped themselves and stayed quiet. The front of the room looked different now. Rows of chairs sat empty. A jacket hung over the back of one. A notebook lay open on another, untouched. The place where everyone had been facing felt far away, like it belonged to another moment. A chair near the front still leaned forward, the way it had been left. No one went back to fix it. People were standing in small gaps between each other, close enough that they had to turn sideways when someone passed behind them. A man folded his hands in front of him. A woman shifted her weight from one foot to the other. Someone took off their glasses, wiped them on their shirt, and put them back on. The room was quiet, but not empty. You could hear breathing. You could hear the soft sound of shoes on the floor when someone adjusted their stance. Bruce Lee stayed near the wall. He didn't step into the center of the space. He didn't move forward. He stayed just where he had been, close to the folded mat, like he was still sitting in the back. But now, there was no back. People stood around him in a wide, loose ring, not tight, not crowded, just close enough that everyone felt connected. Someone in the group looked over their shoulder, saw the empty chairs at the front, and then turned back again. A quiet feeling settled in. No one was checking their phone. No one was whispering anymore. No one was looking at the door. It felt like the room had stopped waiting for something else. It was waiting right here. Bruce Lee lifted his hands slowly. Not high, not fast, just enough for the people closest to him to see. The movement caught everyone's attention without asking for it. People leaned in, not because they couldn't see, but because they didn't want to miss the smallest detail. He showed something simple with his hands, a small motion, easy to follow. No one spoke. Even the people at the edge of the group stood still, like they didn't want to break the quiet. The room held its shape, and for a moment it felt like time had slowed down, just enough for everyone to notice where they were standing. After a while, Bruce Lee stopped moving, his hands lowered back to his sides. Not quickly, not all at once. They rested again on his legs, just as they had before. For a moment, no one reacted. The group stayed where they were, standing in that loose ring around him. It felt like everyone was waiting for something else to happen, even though nothing more was coming. Someone near the edge of the group took a small step back. Their shoe brushed the floor and made a soft sound. They looked down, then back up, like they weren't sure if they were supposed to move yet. Another person stepped back too. They turned slightly and reached for the back of their chair, pulling it closer. A few people followed, not all together, one at a time. A jacket was picked up from the floor. A bag was lifted onto a shoulder. A notebook was closed with a quiet tap. The room slowly found its old shape again. Chairs faced forward. Mats lay flat on the floor. People sat down, stood up, then sat down again, trying to get comfortable. Someone tied their shoe. Someone took a long drink of water. The small, normal sounds came back. Bruce Lee stayed near the wall. He didn't move to the front. He didn't take a different seat. He stayed where he had been from the beginning. A few people looked toward the front of the room, like they remembered what they had come for. But most people stayed turned toward the back. The space felt different now. Not louder, not brighter, just changed. The person at the front finally spoke again, but their voice sounded softer than before. Some people listened. Some people still watched Bruce Lee. The moment didn't end all at once. It faded, like a sound getting quieter instead of stopping. People stood up to leave. They nodded to each other as they passed. Someone gave a small smile. Someone held the door open for the person behind them. The room slowly emptied. In the end, Bruce Lee stood up. He adjusted the mat with his foot and walked toward the door. No one followed him. No one called out his name, but a few heads turned as he passed. The chairs at the front were still empty. The back of the room felt full. He never asked to be at the front. By the time it ended, no one wanted to be anywhere else.